The city lights were bright, but they gave her no warmth. Tall alien towers shone like silver blades against the night sky, filled with the noise of life, laughter, and music. But in the shadow of those towers, at the edge of a broken street, sat a lonely girl. She was not like the others. Her skin was pale, her clothes torn, and her body thin from many days without food. She was an alien child, but even among her own kind, she was unwanted. She sat on the cold stone, her knees pulled to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as if her thin arms could hide her from the world. Every few minutes, groups of other aliens passed by. Some looked at her with disgust. Some laughed cruelly. Others did not look at all, as if she were nothing more than a shadow on the street. The girl had not eaten properly in many days. Her stomach ached with hunger, but no one cared. She had tried to beg for food, holding out her small hand to the crowds, but every time she reached out, she was mocked. Coins were thrown not into her hand, but into the dirt. Children pointed at her and copied her weak voice. Adults told their children not to go near her as if she carried some kind of curse. Still, she stayed there. She did not cry loudly, for she had learned long ago that tears brought no help. She only sat quietly, her eyes staring at the ground. Yet in those eyes there was something strange, something strong. She was waiting for someone, waiting for something. Perhaps she did not even know what it was. The night grew colder. The noise of the city faded as the crowd moved on to brighter streets. The lonely girl pulled her torn cloak tighter around her shoulders. Her bones hurt from sitting too long, and her throat burned with thirst. She looked at the stars above the towers. Once, when she was younger, she had believed the stars meant hope. Now they only reminded her of how far away everything good was from her life. But even in her pain, she did not give up. Every time footsteps came near, she raised her head just a little. Every time her heart whispered, maybe this time someone will stop. Maybe this time someone will care. And every time her hope was crushed again. Then came the laughter. A group of young aliens walked by. They saw her and stopped. Still alive? One of them said with a smirk. She's like a stray animal, another answered. They tossed a piece of rotten food toward her. It landed near her feet and they laughed louder. The girl did not touch it. She only lowered her head, shame burning inside her. She wanted to vanish, to melt into the shadows so their eyes would no longer pierce her. The group walked away, leaving their cruel voices echoing in the night. The girl's thin fingers pressed against the stone. For a moment her shoulders shook, but still no tears fell. She had none left. The silence after they left was heavy. The whole street seemed empty now. The girl closed her eyes, fighting the dizziness of hunger. The world tilted and swayed, and she thought she might fall asleep and never wake again. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe it would be less painful than another day of being ignored, of being mocked. But just as she thought that, she heard a different sound. Footsteps. Slow, steady, heavy, not like the careless ones of the cruel, not like the rushing ones of the crowd. These footsteps were different. The girl opened her tired eyes. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. The figure walking closer was strange, different from all the others she had seen before. His shape was tall, his clothes rough, his walk strong but not proud. His face looked human. The people of this city rarely spoke kindly of humans. They called them weak, slow, soft-hearted. Some even mocked humans as useless wanderers. And yet here one walked calmly through the alien city as if he belonged. The girl watched him with a mix of fear and curiosity. The man's eyes moved across the street. Most people would not notice someone sitting in the shadows, but his gaze was sharp. He saw her. Their eyes met for a single second. She expected him to turn away like all the others had. She expected him to ignore her because she had learned that was what people did. But he did not turn away. He slowed his steps. He looked at her as if she mattered. Her heart began to beat faster, though she did not understand why. She pulled her cloak closer, ready for mockery, ready for another cruel laugh. Instead, the human stopped. He stood just a few feet from her, silent, studying her face. And then, very slowly, he reached into his bag. The girl's eyes widened. Was this another trick? Another game? She could not look away. The night air grew still. The lonely alien girl, who had been mocked, starved, and forgotten, stared at the strange human. And in that moment, in the middle of the cold street, something began, something that would change both of their lives forever. The human walked deeper into the alien city, his boots clicking against the stone streets. The night was alive with glowing lights and strange voices, but he did not seem afraid. His clothes were plain, patched and worn, yet his shoulders were straight and his step carried a quiet strength. People turned their heads as he passed. Whispers followed him, sharp and mocking. "What is a human doing here?" one alien muttered. "Does he think he belongs among us?" Another sneered. "They say humans are soft, too weak to survive in real cities." The human ignored them. He had learned that words could cut, but only if he let them. His eyes searched the shadows, sharp and calm, as though he was looking for something. And then he saw her. The alien girl was still sitting against the cold wall, her knees pulled tight to her chest. She tried to make herself small, invisible, but his gaze caught her. Their eyes met again, and for the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not as trash, not as a joke, but as a living soul. The human slowed his pace. The crowd nearby grew silent, curious. Would he mock her like the others? Would he kick dirt at her feet and laugh? The girl braced herself, expecting cruelty. But instead, the man knelt down. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small package. The crowd leaned closer. Some smirked, waiting for the joke. The girl's breath caught in her throat as he unwrapped the bundle. Inside was simple food: bread, dried meat, and a flask of water. Her eyes widened. She had not tasted real food in days. Her hands trembled, her body screamed for it, but her heart was afraid. What if this was a trick? What if the human would pull it back and laugh like the others? She stared at him, silent, unsure. The man did not laugh. He placed the food gently in front of her. His voice was low, steady, and kind. "Eat," he said. The single word felt heavier than all the cruel voices she had ever heard. It was not pity. It was not mockery. It was command, but also care. The girl hesitated. Her pride warred with her hunger. Around her, the crowd began to whisper again. "Look at that. The human is feeding the stray." Disgusting. Why waste food on her? Their words stung her ears, but the man did not turn his head. His eyes never left hers. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she picked up the bread. She brought it to her lips, tasting the dry crust. The moment it touched her tongue, her body flooded with warmth. She ate quickly, almost desperately, while the crowd looked on. The human gave her the flask next. She lifted it with both hands and drank. Water running down her chin. It was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. When she lowered it, her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. For the first time, she whispered, "Why?" The human tilted his head. "Because you're hungry." The words were simple, but they struck her harder than any insult. No one had ever cared why she was hungry. No one had ever thought she deserved to eat. And yet this stranger, this human, someone the city mocked and dismissed, had seen her pain and answered it without question. But kindness does not go unnoticed. In the shadows, some aliens frowned. Their voices turned sharper, darker. "He dares break the order of things. She is meant to be nothing, and he gives her dignity. This human should be taught his place." The girl heard them. Fear clawed at her chest. She leaned close and whispered, "They will hate you for this. They will hurt you." The man looked at her with calm eyes. "Then let them hate. Let them try." The words made her heart tremble. No one had ever spoken like that for her. No one had ever stood beside her, as if she was worth defending. The crowd began to scatter, some disgusted, some whispering of punishment to come. The human rose to his feet and looked down at her. "What's your name?" he asked. She lowered her eyes. It had been so long since anyone had asked. Her voice was small, rough from silence. She gave him her name. He nodded once, as if sealing a pact. "Then you are not alone anymore." The girl's chest tightened. The words felt like a promise too big for her to believe. And yet some part of her wanted to believe it. Some part of her wanted to trust the strange human who had reached out his hand when all others had turned away. As they stood in the dim glow of the street, eyes watching from the shadows, the air grew tense. The city was not a place of mercy. The girl knew that. The man surely knew it too, and yet he did not walk away. He stayed beside her, calm, steady, unshaken. The night whispered with danger. The girl's hunger was quiet now, replaced with fear and hope. She did not know which was stronger, but deep inside she felt it. Something had begun. Something the city would not forgive. Something that would change her life forever. The girl sat frozen with the half-empty flask in her hands. The human's gift still rested beside her, bread and dried meat. She had eaten some, but hunger still clawed at her stomach. Every bite felt like a miracle, but also like a test. Could this be real? Could someone truly give without cruelty hidden behind it? She looked up at him again. The man did not rush her. He only stood nearby, calm, as if guarding her from the eyes that still lingered in the shadows. His presence was strange, solid like a wall that could not be pushed down. Slowly, the girl picked up the dried meat. Her hands shook as she tore a small piece and chewed. The taste was salty, rough, but her body welcomed it with desperate joy. She ate faster, then slowed. Afraid the food might vanish if she finished too quickly, she forced herself to savor it, each bite filling the emptiness that had haunted her for so long. And yet, while her stomach found relief, her heart grew heavier. Every bite reminded her of how long she had been left to starve. Every sip of water reminded her of the voices that had laughed at her suffering. She wondered if the kindness of one human could really erase the cruelty of so many others. Around them, the street had gone strangely quiet. Some passers-by hurried away, not wanting to be part of what they saw. Others stayed at a distance, whispering. The girl could hear their words sharp as knives. Pathetic. She eats like an animal. The human is lowering himself. This will bring trouble. Her shoulders tensed. She wanted to stop eating, to crawl back into the shadows and disappear before more eyes turned on her. But the man's voice came again, steady like an anchor. Don't listen. Finish your meal. The girl looked at him, startled. How had he known what she was thinking? His gaze softened. You're alive. That matters. Eat. Something inside her cracked. She bent her head and continued, tears blurring her vision, though she tried to hold them back. Her pride told her not to cry in front of him, not to show weakness. But her body betrayed her. Her lips trembled, her chest ached, and silent tears rolled down her cheeks. The human did not mock her. He did not turn away. He simply crouched beside her, his presence strong, steady, and silent, as if saying, cry if you must. You are safe. For the first time in years, the girl let the tears fall freely, and with each tear, the wall of shame around her heart began to crack. But not everyone was silent. From across the street, a loud voice broke through. What is this? A group of alien men stepped forward. Their clothes were sharp, their eyes colder than steel. They were not ordinary passers-by. They were the kind who enforced the city's unspoken rules, the kind who punished anyone who tried to change them. The crowd shrank back as the men approached. The girl froze, clutching the flask to her chest. She knew them. Everyone in the streets knew them. They were bullies cloaked in power, and they never forgave insults. The leader sneered, pointing at her. That one is worthless. Everyone knows it. Then his eyes shifted to the human. And you, outsider, do you think feeding her will change anything? Do you think your pity makes her less of a stray? The human rose slowly to his full height. His eyes did not flinch. She was hungry, so I gave her food. The alien leader laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. Listen to him. So noble, so foolish. Humans are all the same, soft, weak. You should leave this city before you learn why kindness is dangerous. The girl's hands trembled. She wanted to tell him to leave, to run before they hurt him, but the human only stood taller. His voice was calm, almost quiet, but it carried weight. Kindness is not weakness. Walking past her like she is nothing, that is weakness. The crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken against these men. The girl's heart pounded. Fear twisted in her chest. She wanted to scream, stop. They will kill you. But no sound left her lips. The alien leader's smile faded. His eyes hardened. You will regret those words, human. The girl felt the air grow colder. She pulled the cloak tighter around her body, wishing she could vanish. Trouble was here, and it was because of her. She knew it. She wished she had never accepted the food, never looked into his eyes, but at the same time, a spark flickered in her chest, a spark she had never felt before. Someone had stood for her. Someone had called her worth defending. That spark burned against the fear, small but alive. The men stepped closer, their shadows long in the torchlight. The crowd scattered further, not wanting to be caught in what was coming. The girl pressed against the wall, trapped. The human moved slightly, standing between her and them. His stance was simple but unyielding, as if he was carved from stone. The leader's eyes narrowed. Then so be it. Tonight you will learn what happens to those who break the order. The girl's breath caught. Her body shook. She knew what would follow, violence, pain, perhaps death. And yet, even in her terror, She could not look away from the human's back. For the first time in her life, she was not alone in the dark, and in that moment, as danger closed in, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. Hope hurt almost as much as hunger. The narrow street grew tense, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The alien girl clutched the flask close to her chest, her body pressed against the cold wall. Before her stood the human, tall and unmoving, blocking the group of alien men who had stepped forward with cruel smiles. Their presence made the crowd shrink back into the shadows, eager to watch but too afraid to stand near. The leader of the men spat on the ground. His eyes were sharp like a blade looking for something to cut. This city does not care for strays. And yet you human, you dare feed one? You make her think she matters, the crowd whispered. Some laughed nervously. Others nodded, agreeing with the leader. The girl's stomach tightened in fear. She had lived her whole life under those rules. She mattered to no one. To be noticed was to be mocked. To be fed was to be shamed. And yet the human had broken those rules with a single act of kindness. The leader's voice grew louder, aimed at the gathering crowd. Look at this, all of you. A human feeding trash. A soft creature trying to play hero. He thinks his pity can erase what she is. His words were poison meant to turn the crowd into fire. Laughter spread. Mocking voices rose around them. She's nothing. He should throw her scraps like a dog. Maybe he wants to keep her as a pet. The girl closed her eyes. Shame burned inside her, hotter than hunger ever had. She wanted to sink into the ground, to disappear before the laughter crushed her. Her hands shook so badly the flask almost slipped from her grasp. She whispered in a broken voice, "Please, go, leave me. They will hurt you because of me." But the human did not leave. His voice cut through the noise like steel. "Enough!" The laughter faltered. The crowd stared at him, stunned. His eyes burned, not with rage, but with a steady fire that would not bend. He turned to the men. "You call her nothing. You mock her suffering. That is not strength. That is cowardice." The street fell silent. The alien girl's eyes widened. No one had ever spoken such words for her. No one had ever dared. The leader's smile twisted into a snarl. "You dare insult us?" He stepped closer, his men following, their bodies heavy with threat. "Do you not understand what city you walk in? Here the weak stay low. The unwanted starve. And those who break this order are crushed." The human took one step forward, closing the space between them. He did not raise his fists, but his stance was firm. "Then crush me. But know this. If your strength comes only from mocking the weak, then you are already broken." The words struck like lightning. Gasps filled the air. Some in the crowd turned their faces, afraid to be seen hearing such defiance. Others stared with wide eyes, as if watching a fire they could not look away from. The girl's heart raced. She wanted to scream at him to stop. She wanted to beg him to run. But her voice caught in her throat. Instead, she clutched the flask tighter and watched, trembling. The leader's face darkened. Rage replaced his sneer. "You will regret this, human. You think one act of kindness makes you noble. No, it makes you foolish. Tonight you will learn what happens when you defy the order of things." He raised his hand and his men stepped forward. Their eyes gleamed with violence. The crowd backed away even further, forming a wide circle around them. Whispers spread quickly. This would not end with words. The girl's breath came in quick gasps. She pressed herself tighter against the wall, her eyes darting between the human and the advancing men. She knew what would happen. She had seen these men beat others for far less, and this human, this stranger who had fed her, was now the target of their anger. Still, he did not move back. His voice was calm, but it carried like thunder. "I do not care about your order. I care about what is right. And right now she is hungry. That is all that matters." The girl's chest ached. No one had ever spoken like that for her. No one had ever risked anything for her. And yet this human who owed her nothing was willing to face danger just to give her dignity. The leader hissed. "Then bleed for her." He snapped his fingers and his men moved in. The girl cried out, "Stop!" But her voice was lost in the noise. She wanted to cover her eyes, to shield herself from the violence about to fall. Yet some force kept her looking, unable to turn away from the man who stood for her. The human did not raise his hands yet, but the fire in his eyes grew. His body was still waiting, ready, and in that tense heartbeat before the clash, the girl felt something strange, something terrifying and powerful. Hope. It was small, fragile, and painful, but it burned inside her like a spark refusing to die, even as fear pressed down on her, even as the shadows of violence closed in. That spark refused to vanish for the first time. She dared to think, maybe I am not nothing, and with that thought, the night was set on fire. The moment the leader snapped his fingers, the street shifted. The crowd scattered back, eager to watch but unwilling to be caught in the storm. The alien girl pressed against the wall, her heart racing like a trapped bird. She knew what was coming. She had seen these men destroy others with no mercy, and now, because of her, the humans stood in their path. The men moved forward, their steps heavy, their eyes filled with cruel delight. They circled like hunters around prey. One of them cracked his knuckles, another pulled a metal rod from his belt. The leader stood back, smirking, confident that the human would soon be broken. "Do you understand, outsider?" the leader called. "This city has no place for kindness. Mercy is weakness, and weakness must bleed." The words cut into the girl's chest like knives. She wanted to scream at the human to run, to save himself before it was too late. But when she looked at him, she froze. The man did not tremble. He did not flinch. His shoulders were square, his jaw firm, his eyes calm. He was not blind to the danger. She could see that he knew exactly what was coming, but he did not move away. Instead, he stepped slightly to the side, enough to place himself fully between her and the attackers. Her throat tightened. No one had ever stood in front of her before. No one had ever made themselves a shield for her. The first attacker lunged, swinging the metal rod. The human moved swiftly, faster than the girl expected. He ducked low, the rod slicing the air above his head, and struck with his fist. The blow landed hard against the alien's stomach. The attacker stumbled back, gasping. The crowd gasped too. Whispers spread. "He fights back!" A human dare strike one of them? The leader's smile faltered, but only for a moment. He barked, "Finish him!" Two more rushed in. The girl clutched the flask to her chest, her eyes wide. She could barely breathe as the fight unfolded. The human twisted, blocked, struck again. He was not the strongest man, not compared to the towering aliens, but he moved with precision, with purpose. Every strike was sharp, every step careful. But numbers had weight. The men circled tighter, their anger burning hotter with each failed attempt to bring him down. One landed a punch against his shoulder, another shoved him hard against the wall. The girl's cry tore from her throat. "No!" The human gritted his teeth but did not fall. He pushed off the wall, fists ready again. His eyes blazed with something the girl had never seen before, unyielding resolve. He was fighting not for pride, not for victory, but for something greater. He was fighting for her. The leader stepped closer, fury twisting his face. "Enough playing. Break him." The shadows grew darker. The attackers closed in once more. The girl's body shook. She wanted to run, to hide, but her legs would not move. Her fear was a cage around her. Still, her eyes never left the human, she whispered, voice trembling. "Why? Why do this for me?" And though the noise of the fight roared around them, though fists and shouts filled the night, she heard his answer clearly. "Because you deserve better?" The words struck deeper than any blow. For a moment her fear cracked and something new filled her chest, something that both warmed and terrified her. Hope. The human fought on, but the odds pressed against him. One attacker slammed into his side, another grabbed his arm. The leader laughed cruelly. "See? Even your stubbornness will end. Even your courage breaks." But the human's voice rose, strong, steady, even as he fought. "No, my courage does not break. Your cruelty does." The crowd was silent now. Some looked at the human with disbelief, others with hidden awe. For years they had lived under the rule of fear. For years they had turned their eyes away. And now one stranger, one human, was defying it openly. The leader's smirk faded. He sensed the shift. The whispers of the crowd were no longer mocking, no longer laughing. They were uncertain, and uncertainty was dangerous for men like him. His eyes turned sharp. "End this now." "Kill him if you must." The girl's breath caught. Her body screamed at her to stay silent, to stay small, as she always had. But her heart shouted louder. She could not let him die for her. Not like this. Her voice broke free, louder than ever before. "Stop, if you hurt him, you will answer to me too." The crowd gasped. She had never spoken like that, not once. She was the silent stray, the mocked shadow. But now her voice rang clear, filled with something fierce. The attackers paused for half a second, stunned. The leader's eyes narrowed. "You dare raise your voice?" The girl's legs shook, but she forced herself to stand. Her thin frame trembled, her body weak, but her eyes were steady. Yes, because for the first time, I am not nothing. The human glanced back at her, and in his tired, bruised face a faint smile appeared. The leader growled, his fury boiling. Then both of you will pay. The night was thick with danger. Shadows closed tighter. The fight was not over. But something had already changed. The girl was no longer silent, and the city for the first time had heard her voice. The moment the girl's voice rang out, the whole street froze. The crowd, which had gathered only to laugh and jeer, now stared in stunned silence. No one had ever heard her speak with such force. For years she had been nothing but a shadow, a silent figure begging for scraps. But now her words cut through the air like fire. The leader's eyes narrowed. He did not like the shift in the crowd. He did not like the spark of defiance burning where once there had only been silence. He snarled and raised his hand. Silence her. Silence them both. His men moved again, circling tighter. Their heavy steps echoed like drums of war. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run, but her legs stayed firm. She wanted to hide, but her voice would not let her. The human stood battered but unbroken, his clothes torn, a thin trail of blood marking his cheek. His fists were raw, his body heavy with exhaustion, yet his stance was steady. He looked back at the girl only for a moment, and she saw it. The faintest smile, small but unyielding. "You are not nothing," he had told her. Those words still burned inside her, pushing back the fear. The attackers lunged. One swung the metal rod again, aiming for the human's head. At the last second, he ducked low, his hand shooting out to grab the alien's wrist. With a sudden twist, he wrenched the rod free and slammed it into the attacker's chest. The alien stumbled back, coughing. Another rushed him from the side, but the human pivoted, striking with the rod. The sharp crack echoed through the street. The crowd gasped. The human fought like a man who had nothing left to lose and everything to protect, but numbers still pressed against him. Another blow landed against his back, sending him stumbling forward. A fist cracked against his jaw. He staggered but did not fall. His grip on the rod tightened, his eyes blazing. The girl's body shook as she watched. Every strike against him felt like a strike against her. She wanted to help, but what could she do? She was weak, starved, powerless. Yet her heart screamed, "Do something!" She looked around desperately. Her eyes caught a loose stone near her foot. Her hands trembled as she bent down and picked it up. The stone was small, heavy in her palm. She had never fought anyone in her life, but when another attacker rushed the human from behind, she acted. Her voice cracked as she screamed, "Behind you!" At the same time, she hurled the stone with all the strength her thin arm could muster. It struck the attacker's shoulder. It was not much, but it was enough. He stumbled for a second, distracted, and in that second the human turned, swinging the rod. The attacker fell back with a grunt. The girl's chest heaved. The crowd stared in shock. She had not only spoken, she had fought back. The human glanced at her, sweat and blood on his face, and gave her the smallest nod of thanks. That nod made her knees weak, but also filled her with fire. She was not just a shadow anymore. She was part of the fight. The leader snarled, his rage boiling over. Pathetic. "Both of you will break!" He stormed forward, his fists clenched. Unlike his men, he was stronger, faster, more dangerous. The girl's breath caught. She wanted to warn the human, but the leader was already there, striking hard. The human blocked one blow, dodged another, but the third slammed into his ribs. He gasped, his knees nearly buckling. The girl screamed, "No!" Her voice cracked the silence again. She wanted to rush forward, but her legs felt like stone. She could only watch as the human, beaten and bloodied, stood tall once more. The leader sneered, "Stay down, human. You've lost." But the man shook his head, spitting blood to the ground. His voice was steady, burning with quiet fire. "No, I stand for her." The girl's heart stopped. The words echoed through her like thunder. No one had ever stood for her. No one had ever claimed she was worth standing for. The leader roared and charged again. The fight was brutal, each blow echoing in the night. The human staggered, but he did not break. The girl, shaking, grabbed another stone and hurled it. It struck the ground near the leader's foot, distracting him for the smallest moment. The human seized that chance, driving the rod into the leader's side. The leader gasped, stumbling back in shock. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. No one had ever seen the untouchable man falter. The men hesitated, their confidence shaken. The leader clutched his side, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. "This is not over," he spat. His voice shook with fury. "You've made an enemy of us all." He gestured sharply, and his men dragged him back into the shadows. Their footsteps faded, but their threat lingered like poison in the air. The street fell silent again. The crowd whispered but dared not move closer. Slowly, one by one, they melted away, leaving only the girl and the human in the dim light. The girl's knees gave out and she collapsed to the ground, clutching the flask. Tears streamed down her face, but this time they were not only from fear. They were from something else. "Something new," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why? Why would you fight for me?" The human crouched beside her, his breathing ragged, his body bruised. His eyes were tired but kind. He reached out his hand, steady even in his pain. "Because dignity is worth fighting for," he said softly, "and you have it. Don't ever forget." Her thin hand trembled as she reached for his, and for the first time in her life she did not feel alone. The street was empty now. The shadows had swallowed the angry men and the curious crowd had slipped away. Only two figures remained, the human, battered and bruised, and the alien girl, trembling but alive. The night air was cold, yet for the first time in her life the girl felt something warm. She sat on the ground, clutching the flask to her chest. Her thin hands shook, but her eyes stayed on him. He was hurt, blood on his face, his clothes torn, his body heavy with exhaustion. Yet he did not look broken, he looked unshakable. The human crouched beside her, his breaths deep and uneven. Slowly he extended his hand toward her, not with pity, not with force. With quiet strength, the girl stared at it. Her mind raced. All her life she had been mocked, starved, treated as less than nothing. Every time she had reached out, she had been pushed away, laughed at, crushed. And now, here was this man, offering his hand as if it meant more than food, more than safety. It meant choice. It meant she mattered. Her throat burned as she whispered, "Why me?" The human's eyes softened. "Because no one deserves to be left alone in the dark, not you. Not anyone." Her chest ached, her heart trembling. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her hand. It was small, fragile, shaking. When her fingers touched his, she half expected him to pull away, to laugh, to vanish like a cruel dream. But he didn't. His hand closed gently around hers, steady, firm, unyielding. For the first time, someone's grip held her, not to push her down, but to lift her up. Tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and unending. She did not wipe them away. She let them fall. For once she was not ashamed of them. For once her tears were not weakness. They were proof that something inside her still lived. The human helped her to her feet. Her legs shook, almost too weak to stand, but his steady hand kept her upright. She leaned into him, her thin frame trembling against his strength. "You're safe now," he said quietly. But in her heart, she knew safety was fragile. The city was cruel. The men who had threatened them would not forget this night. She knew danger would return, yet standing beside him, her fear did not crush her as before. For the first time, she felt the strength of hope. The two of them began to walk slowly down the empty street. The city's bright towers loomed above, cold and sharp, but they no longer seemed so high, so impossible. With each step, the girl felt the weight of her old life slipping little by little. In the shadows, unseen eyes still watched. Whispers spread through the alleys, carried like fire. The human stood against them. The girl spoke back. The order was broken. What had happened tonight would not stay hidden. The city would remember. The girl sensed it too. "They will come again," she whispered. "They will not forgive this." The human's reply was calm, steady, without fear. "Then let them come. We will face them together." Her eyes widened. Together. That single word struck deeper than any promise. All her life she had been alone. Alone in hunger. Alone in shame. Alone in the cold. Now someone said we. Her steps grew steadier. Her head lifted a little higher. She was still thin, still weak. But something inside her had changed. They reached the edge of the street where the shadows met the lights of the city. The human paused, still holding her hand. "From this moment," he said, "you are not nothing. You never were. Remember that." The girl's voice was small, but it did not shake. "I will." She looked up at the stars beyond the towers. For years, those stars had mocked her, shining far away while she sat in the dark. But now, for the first time, she felt as if the stars were watching her, waiting. The night would not be easy. The days ahead would be harder still. But hope had been born, and once born it could not be killed so easily. The human squeezed her hand gently. "Come, there's a long road ahead." And with that they stepped forward together, leaving behind the alley where she had once starved and cried alone. The city would not forget this night. The men would not forgive. But the girl was no longer just a shadow in the dirt. She was someone who had been seen, someone who had been defended, someone who had stood and spoken, and the galaxy, sooner or later, would hear the story of the starving alien girl and the human who reached out his hand. Because this was not the end. It was only the beginning.